Hello, and welcome to the Canadian Story, where we discuss what Canada is, what Canada could be, and what Canada should be. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special episode of the Canadian Story, where I'm joined by Bryan, who is the founder and Twitter extraordinaire star of Too Close to Call, which is one of Canada's preeminent polling sites. A lot of political campaigners, organizers spend a lot of time on his sites during elections. Welcome to the show, Bryan, and thank you very much for coming.
Hi, well, thank you for having me. This is great. This is a great description of what I do. I mean, I've been doing it for 10 years now. I think I started with the 2011 federal election. So it's been a while now to have so much data, so many elections covered. I mean, it's pretty crazy when you think about it.
Now, a lot of people don't understand the significance of data in elections, right? Even a lot of campaigners are still in this notion that it's all about feel and vibes. Anthony Kosh, who I know is a friend of yours and a good friend of mine, often talks about vibes and how important they are, right? But people like yourself and I, I'm a ground organizer, you're a poll analyst. We understand that it all comes down to the numbers at the end of the day. And no matter what someone like Jean Charest might say, where it's all about points, ultimately points are just a representation of numbers. Tell us a little bit about how, like, for those who don't know anything about data and politics, a lot of our listeners are fairly politically naive or new, or they're amateurs. So explain kind of what you look for in the data to begin your analysis.
So somebody like me, or people who do projections like me, we mostly use, publicly released poll data, right? So we use the polls. Sometimes we use the crosstabs, especially by province or by regions. I know some of us or some models, they use the demographic numbers, but it's a little bit tricky, I think, personally, to use them. I mean, it makes sense to use the demographic numbers by, the vote by age, by education, by income, because we get those data, we know in each riding how many people are age 18 to 34. So on paper, it makes a lot of sense. I think one of the issue in really using data in Canadian politics is we only have polls. We don't get exit polls. We do get election studies. Well, we get one, but it takes a long time before we get it. And so we don't get as much data, or remotely as much as in the US. So I think it makes, if you try to build a model that is really, really complicated, I think sometimes you might get lost in the details. I mean, that's my story. I mean, my model used to be a lot more complex. And honestly, I realized over the years that you're better off having a simple model, because what matters more than how complex your algorithm is getting the voting percentage right. So if you get the voting percentage right, then you already 80% of the way there. So that's the data we can use, really, right? I mean, people like me, if you do politics and you're on a campaign, you're going to have access to a lot more tracking and internal polls where this is much richer data, right? I mean, I've seen it a little bit during this leadership campaign where we see each participant, each candidate, and they have their own list of supporters, especially if they sign up through their website. At the federal level, we know the Liberals are really, really good. And you mentioned how many, some people say it's all about vibes. Fair enough. You can win with vibes, right? I mean, look at Trump versus Hillary Clinton, who had all the data from Barack Obama, right, or his team. But at the end of the day, you still need the data. You still need to know where your voters are. You need to be able to track them, to get them out. And I think that's one thing the Liberals under Trudeau have been doing really, really well.
Oh, I agree. I'm in awe of the Liberals' data game, and their micro-targeting in specific ridings is mind-blowing. So let's take this to 20,000 feet a little bit more, because you're just so much more deep on this than our listeners and myself. So Zach, why don't you ask a question that you just got from that, because you don't study political data?
Yeah, I would say where I want to start is where do you fit into an election process? So you obviously work with data. Are you hired out by political parties to represent that data, or is it just for public consumption? Let's start there.
So it has been mostly public consumption, right? I've worked in the past with many newspapers, right, including like I've done 2 campaigns for the Journal de Montréal in Quebec. I quit after the second one because, well, they wanted me to write every week, and when it's outside of an election period, that's not really my thing. I mean, I was getting bored. There is not that much to write about. In terms of, I've never been hired per se by a political party. There was one time where I've had, I have contacts with parties and MPs or MLAs. There was this one party in Quebec, Quebec Solidaire, where years ago, I was actually pretty close to their leader, Amir Kadir. And so we had relatively regular chat, and he did ask me sometimes about, data, and he would ask me to run some scenarios. For instance, I remember they were discussing at some point whether they should maybe not merge, but make a deal with the Parti Québécois. And he wanted to see, what would happen, like if, let's say they remove or they withdrew 10 candidates in 10 ridings, would they be likely to win them? And so, I had the data for this. I was like, well, if we use the second choices and so on, I think it would be likely to win like 7 or 8 of them. So that's really as far as I've been doing this. If we go more recently, this leadership campaign for the Conservative, I haven't worked for a party specifically, but I have shared my stuff with some campaign, especially the smaller ones, right? I mean, because I think I produced some content that was pretty good, or at least according to me, I thought I was pretty happy with what I've done.
You absolutely
with like
great content.
With the fundraising. So I remember I just, I know some of the campaign managers, so I just emailed them the stuff, but I haven't been contracted out or paid by them for now.
That's pretty incredible. So you can use your data to predict how a political move might play out in terms of votes.
Sure. Well, hopefully. I mean, ultimately, they didn't go through. So, I don't have a way to test whether I was right or wrong. But I mean, ultimately, I think I have enough experience to, ultimately, it might be funny. I mean, a lot of the things I do, it's really just gathering the data. I mean, people think that obviously I have a big Excel file. I do simulations like where I randomize like 50,000 times. I used to do it in MATLAB. I now use RStudio. So, it all sounds really geeky and data analytics. But ultimately, honestly, during an election, at least half of the work is staying on top of your things and just collecting all the data you can. And so when they ask me about this, is because people don't have all the data. They don't spend hours on Twitter and making sure they have all the polls about the second votes or second choices and whatnot. Most people don't, they don't do this for as a living. So just having this data and being able to tell them, well, actually, no, you're not the second choice of this party, or you are the second choice. That already goes a long way, honestly.
Right. Okay. So what about how you go about collecting your data? That's got to be like a large bulk of what you do. Where do you go to find your data points?
It has become easier over the years with, I'm thinking of like the Twitter account, Canadian Polling, where this guy is actually doing, the work of finding all the polls, because honestly, you missed some. Even if you follow this all the time, it's really possible that the next day you're like, what? There wasn't a new poll from this firm yesterday. I completely missed it. Or was there a poll just for New Brunswick? I don't live there. I don't watch the local news. So that has been easier, but it's really just paying attention, going on. Wikipedia is awesome. You have a few guys out there who really keep the page updated. Like, it's amazing work. So it makes my life a lot easier. Last federal election, I also use a lot of the Canadian election study from 2019. So it's just downloading and using the data sets. So there is a little bit of skills, because those large data sets, I mean, they're not a simple Excel file a lot of time, but I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, it's just making sure you don't miss anything. So you go everywhere, you spend time on Reddit, Twitter, Wikipedia, and then you gather everything, and you hope you haven't missed anything.
So would it be fair to say that what you do is you go out into the world, you go out into Twitter, you go out to Reddit, you look at as much local news as you can, and you capture as many data points like local polls that come out, and then compile them all into one place and do a meta-analysis and try to use that information to predict the direction a certain election might travel?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I do. I mean, and then obviously you have adjustments. I mean, for instance, when you want to do, including a riding poll, for instance, that's pretty easy. I mean, I compare what my projection was, I compare to the poll. I usually do an average between the two of them. But then, sometimes you have more tricky data to use. Like you have a few polls during a federal election where they're going to give you the numbers for the GTA. All of a sudden, I mean, they don't all do, but some of them will give you just the GTA. So when you have this, then you want to start incorporating this data. But then you need to think a little bit how you do this, right? I mean, if the poll is only the GTA, can you just add it to your average, or do you have to do adjustments because you use provincial numbers? So it's this type of numbers. But yes, as I said, it's not like incredibly advanced calculations. I mean, even if I go back to running my simulations, and it's really just asking the computer, hey, can you just do 50,000 random sampling? It's not I understand, for the average person, they wouldn't know how to do this, but when you know how to do this, it's one line of code in a software that is free. So that's what it is. And once you have it, then you just copy and paste.
Nice. So brag a little bit. How accurate do you find yourself?
I mean, I haven't done a full analysis of how accurate. I used to do it, and I do it after every election. I mean, I think I've been doing pretty well. I've had a few misses. I have a few really good elections. I mean, the recent Ontario election, I think I was pretty spot on. And I think among the big, sites who do projections, I'm thinking of, 338 or Eric Grenier, Lynn Tossup or mentioned. I think I was actually the best last time. To be fair, being the best or being the second or, fifth, there's a little bit of luck. I mean, let's be honest here. I mean, you're asking me to brag, but there is some luck. Sometimes you just get lucky in there was a riding that you had NDP by 0.1 and it went NDP by 0.1. But if your model had, NDP losing by 0.1, your model was almost as good. You just got unlucky. I think overall the accuracy was about we correctly project about 90% of the ridings, between 88 and 92%, which I think is pretty amazing because, again, we need to realize we don't get that many riding polls in Canada, right? I mean, we get provincial polls for provincial elections with some numbers by regions, and even there it's not perfect and consistent. So we get essentially 5 numbers for province, and I turn these 5 numbers into 125 in Quebec. And then after this, out of 125 ridings, I will correctly call like over 90%. So that's, to put that in perspective, this is pretty similar to the accuracy of people like Nate Silver or people who do projections in the US, but they have 10 times more data. They never have a race without poll. They barely have to do projections. They just aggregate polls. It's actually easier to do it in the States than we do it in Canada. So I think that's pretty remarkable. Obviously, sometimes you miss. I mean, 2015, 2019 were pretty big misses. I think after that, was it my model or was it, just bad luck? I think it's a mix of both. I think 2015, mostly we all missed because the Liberals did better than the polls. They really just increased the last 2 days. And I don't think there was really a way to not miss it. 2019, I will take some of the blame. I think there might have been better indicators that there was a more efficient vote of the Liberals in the GTA in particular. And I might not have done enough to take care of this. So I have since then adjusted my model to do better. But even there, at the end of the day, I'm incredibly reliant on polls, right? And so if polls are wrong, most of the time, I'm gonna be wrong. And if they're right, then I'm gonna be right. So there is and it's actually, I think people don't realize this, but when polls are getting published, and let's say you said that the Liberals would be at 35 and they got 33. And then you can brag as a pollster, right? You can be like, well, it's within the margin of error. Look at us, we're so good. But for people like me, if polls had them at 35 and they got 33, that's the difference of 20 or 30 seats potentially, depending where this mistake was. So projections like mine are much more sensitive to small polling errors out there. So most of the time, and I think people don't really realize this when they compare our projections and whether we were right or wrong.
Right.
There's
right.
three.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, one more question, and then I'll turn it back over to David. So let's hit the one that's got to be on a lot of our listeners' minds right now. We're looking at a conservative leadership race. According to your data and the analysis that you've done, where do you see things landing?
Yeah, I think I've been pretty clear, and it has been very, very stable. I mean, that might be the first time where we look at one of those leadership races, and we don't always get a lot of data, but these federal races, we do get a lot, thanks to the fundraising in particular. But every metric you use gives you literally the same answer. It gives you that Poilievre is winning big, he's going to win on the first ballot. Now the question is, does he win with 55 or 75? Honestly, if I want to give you a really wide range, I think this is pretty much where we are. But I would be absolutely shocked if next week or 2 weeks from now on the 10th?
Yeah, 10 days from now. 10 days from now.
Yeah. So if Poilievre didn't win on the first ballot, and I would say by now, even with more than 60%, I would be quite shocked. There would be something really weird that happened. And I think I'm pretty confident with my numbers. So Poilievre first. I think Shire has it for second, maybe not in votes. I think it's still up in the air whether he's going to get more votes or fewer votes than Leslie Lewis. It really depends how efficient his vote is, or inefficient her vote will be. But I think in terms of points, he's pretty locked in second place, then Lewis third, Barber fourth, and Aitchison fifth. I think the order, the ranking is pretty set. And having talked to multiple campaigns out there, I'm pretty confident. I mean, again, I've talked to the Poilievre campaign, and obviously in public, they're not all gonna tell you like they're completely sure to win. But one of the guys was like on Saturday, was it yesterday or 2 days ago? It was like, yeah, honestly, I have the data you want, but you're pretty accurate. So what you have is pretty much what we have as well. So I don't think there shouldn't be huge surprises. If there's gonna be a surprise, I think watch out for Quebec. I mean, the last two leadership races for the Conservative, the one province that went differently than expected was Quebec. I mean, 2017 polls and fundraising were pretty good for Maxime Bernier. He ended up, I think he won Quebec, but really by a small margin. He should have won it way bigger. And 2020, I mean, this is where Mackay lost, right? Peter Mackay. Peter Mackay didn't do bad in 2020. He pretty much did what he had to do everywhere. The one province where he failed is Quebec. He was supposed to win Quebec. That's one of the provinces. And if he had won Quebec, I think he would have been the leader. So that's really polls, fundraising. We're showing a close race in Quebec with, I think, O'Toole slightly ahead. And then on election day, he won by like 20 points or something. I think that was a really clear victory for him. So, I mean, Quebec has fewer members. They're harder to judge in terms of those races. So if there's going to be a surprise, that would be Quebec, one way or another, right? One way could be Charest is right. He's doing much better than expected, and he's from Quebec. So he's getting his vote out, and he's going to get a majority of the points. And if he manages to do this, I don't think that's enough for him to win the leadership, but that's enough for him to get over 20% overall, to maybe even force a second round or third round. So that would be one surprise. The other surprise could be Poilievre is doing much better than expected in Quebec with the rise of the local Conservative, and the fundraising has been really good. And he's not only winning Quebec, but he's gonna win it big, like 60, 70%. And if he does this, well, watch out, he's going to get over 70% overall. So that's really where the uncertainty comes from. But that's very small. I mean, compared to, 2017, I had Maxime Bernier as favorite, but that was like 75% chance of winning. 2020 was literally 50-50 between O'Toole and Mackay. So this is completely different. The fact that I'm so confident and I have absolutely zero doubt that he's gonna win on the first round should tell you everything about the data of this race.
Yeah. Sorry, I know I said I had one more question, but now I have another one. What is it about Quebec and Quebecers that make them the wild card? Is there something that your data can say about that, or is that more of we'll go back to the vibe thing? Is that a vibe thing?
I think it's both. Well, there is a number issue, which is, especially until this year, they just don't have that many members. And the system that they use for the leadership race, right? And if people watching right now don't know, every riding is worth 100 points. It doesn't matter how many votes there are, well, to some extent, but as long as you have at least 100 votes in a riding, then it's 100 points, right? To whoever won, if you were to win all the votes. But so it's proportionate. But so bottom line, whether you get 100 votes in Quebec or 5,000 votes in a riding in Alberta, that could give you the same number of points. So in Quebec, since they used to have so few members, like really, really less than every other province. And we even had, I think last time, there were something like 50 ridings where you didn't even have 100 votes in the riding. So you don't even have 100 members who voted, which compare this to Grand Prairies in Alberta, where it's going to be 5,000 votes. So this creates a lot of uncertainty. Now it's not only knowing how many voters, Peter Mackay and Erin O'Toole had in Quebec. This we can do relatively well, I think. But then it's knowing where those voters would be and how efficient or inefficient the vote will be. So small sample size creates more uncertainty. So that's really one of the main reasons why Quebec is the wild card. The other reason is conservative in Quebec are weird. I mean, and I think people, especially organizers from outside of Quebec, don't know as much about Quebec. They think that conservative in Quebec are like the red Tories, socially progressive, fiscally conservative type, that should go for Peter Mackay. But guess what? They went for true blue Erin O'Toole. So
I wonder who came up with that Quebec strategy. I don't know who that was, but that'd be interesting to know who came up with the Quebec. Did you know that there were ballots, Bourassa being a particular riding? I picked up 6 from a family in Bourassa, and that family of 6 was worth 45 points.
Yeah.
I delivered, I remember at the end of that election, I spent 3 weeks in Quebec, just in Montreal, right? Because I knew that was the highest value for pickup of votes. Yeah. And myself and a friend drove on the last day 500 ballots that were worth over 7 riding worth of points for Erin into the so yeah, I think your analysis is perfect on that. That was the whole strategy. Yeah. The entire campaign strategy was we're winning this thing in Quebec. So as someone who has watched this race, I've really enjoyed your commentary on the Google Analytics, the fundraising. So I want to go beyond polls for a moment, because you're not just a pollster. You're an analyst, and you're analyzing a lot of different data. Yeah. So why don't you share with the listeners a bit of how you analyze Google Analytics and the fundraising numbers, which is the one that I think you do such a good job on that people just don't pay attention to. Sometimes I even forget to do it on a campaign, which is idiotic. But yeah, go into that.
Yeah, well, the main reason really, right? I cannot rely on polls for leadership races because, well, we don't have that many polls. And even when we get them, they're not super useful because at best, they will be able to poll conservative voters, but there is a pretty big difference between voters and members. So, I mean, you have to be creative. So fundraising is a very, very good indicator. I've used this metric at many, now third conservative leadership races. I've used it in Quebec. Quebec is great. When they get a leadership race, you don't only get the fundraising data like at the federal level, you get it on a daily basis. Like Election Quebec website every day.
Are you serious?
They provide you with an update every single day. So
that's incredible.
This is a gold mine. I mean, you can see dynamics, you can see changes right away. When at the federal level, it's like once every 3 months, right? So you do nothing for 2.5, and then boom, you get the data dump on like, what was
But
it?
it's like Christmas every time you get that data.
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember that was early this month, right? Where I thought they were supposed to publish on the 2nd, I think. And I think they were late, they published on the 3rd. So I was up all day on the 2nd, up early, nothing happened. And then the 3rd, I live in Vancouver, so I miss a lot of things from the East Coast, right? And I think, well, some of the conservative guys, like including Anthony Koch, called me and it was like, dude, you're missing the thing, I mean, the data is out and it looks incredible. So the fundraising is great, and it makes sense that it's great, right? What is a good indicator that you're going to vote for somebody? Well, one indicator is you agreed to answer a poll and you said, yeah, I will vote for Justin Trudeau. But the other indicator that is much more powerful is I just gave $200 to Justin Trudeau. If you did this, chances are you're going to vote, and you're not going to forget to vote. You're not going to change your mind. So the fact that we have this fundraising data for leadership races in the federal level, it's great. And then I think this year I went further because I've been using this data the last 2 times, but usually I would just use it at the provincial level. And this year I even went to the riding level, right, which has been very, very interesting. That might be less accurate. I mean, if you go on a riding by riding, don't look at the map and, come back on September 11th and tell me, well, in Bourassa, you said it was like 60-40 and it ended up being 80-20. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of variations. But overall, I thought it gave us a really, really good look at this race. And, the results made sense. If you look at the map I published, where's Joshua winning? That's exactly the ridings you would joke that he would be winning, like Toronto, St. Paul's, University of Rosedale, almost winning Ottawa Center. It's almost like the memes are real when you look at this data. HSN is winning his riding, Barber is winning his, Shara is winning the West Island in Montreal. So that was fantastic to see, to basically be able to confirm what we were thinking. And then it opened the door to all type of analysis, such as, well, is Shara right? When Josh Shara keeps saying, I have the points, or it's not about the numbers, it's about the points. Well, let's look at this. Now we have the donors. We have about 50,000 names who gave money to the Conservative Party over 3 months. Let's put them in their ridings and let's see if you're right, if your vote is efficient or not. And I think the answer was yes and no for Shara. He was right that he's getting more points than votes, but not remotely as much as he was hoping for. And actually, I would say if you start going within province, including within Quebec, his vote is incredibly inefficient. I mean, and we're going to have to talk about this after this race, but I mean, his vote is concentrated in a few urban ridings that on their own might be worth a lot of points, but he is wasting his votes in Toronto, St. Paul. So, I mean, at some point, as we said, St. Paul is worth 100 points. I mean, so that was very interesting for me to look at this. And the other thing you mentioned, Google Trends, right? Which, Google Trends is this fun thing to use. I use it almost every election, but I haven't used it in a predictive way. I use it more as like, hey, that's what's happening. It's fun. One guy maybe did really much better after a debate, but it was, Google Trends is the type of things where you get a lot of people after the election who come out and say, well, actually, I would have been able to predict, using this or this. It's the Trump 2016 syndrome where I say, well, actually, I didn't publish anything, but I would have predicted Trump winning. And it upsets me completely because I'm like, well, if you had it, you should have put it out there. But so Google Trends is, I think, a lot of people, sometimes they use it retroactively to pretend they would have been right. But this time, I'm using it actually as part of my projections because I think it works. In this case, when we don't have as much polling data, it's not a perfect metric. We know, for instance, more, I don't want to use the term ad right, but let's say the new right, like the PPC type of voters, they're overrepresented online with such metrics.
Oh, yeah.
I think they're very, very active. They're very, very engaged. So, that's why Maxime Bernier was really doing much better on Google Trends than he did on election day. So I think if we apply this to the conservative leadership, that most likely indicates an overestimation of Barber and Poilievre, if I were to guess, and that's what I do in my projections. I slightly adjust them down to take that into account, to make it more in line with other data we have.
Man, I love listening to you talk, but I have a gift for you. Can you let me share screen, Zach?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, can I just share it? Okay, so hold on here.
I'm not going to stop you.
Wow, I'm excited now. Is it Christmas before Christmas?
Look at this. I'm going to show you something that you're going to love, and then I'm going to give you access to it. So is my screen shared? Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
No.
Okay. Oh, I'm disabled. You have to let me, Zach.
Oh.
That's why I asked you.
I feel like I'm at work. You know, we use Zoom in my college, and all the workshop, it's the same story. It's like, oh, can I share my screen? Yeah, you're supposed to. Well, it's not working. It's like the same story. It's the
Welcome to the Zoom world, right? Just
yeah.
This is we good, Zach?
I don't know how to let you share your screen, to be entirely honest.
Host.
You could make him co-host, and then he can do it.
Yeah. All right.
Now you're boss.
Here we go. So.
Oh yeah.
Not here yet? So what I want to show you is actually this. We have it every single riding. We have enough responses that I think it's actually. So I'm going to give you free access to this, and you can go through it. But I would love it's not a model. This is just raw numbers, right?
Yeah.
But here's what is interesting about this. These are all members. Yeah. We have almost 4,000 responses from members, which I feel like is a pretty good sample size. So I just wanted to let you know that this exists, and I'm going to give you access to it. Send me your email in the chat, and I'll add you to it. But I'd love your thoughts on this at some point.
Sure. I've been looking at this. I mean, I know you can get free access for like one time or twice. So usually I've been rotating between my email addresses every few weeks to take a look at this. But yeah, this is great. This is what Main Street is really good for. I mean, when they do those polls of members, it's a little bit unfortunate. They haven't covered the conservative leadership at the federal level as much. They did one poll, and after that, they gave up, and I asked them, and essentially, I think they just realized, what's the point? I mean, Poilievre is so ahead. I mean, there is no money to be made there. Nobody will pay us for this data. But in 2020, that was a life-saving. They had those data, and I could combine it with the leadership, with the fundraising, and it made it much more accurate. Weirdly enough, each metric, if you only use the fundraising, you would have been wrong. If you only use the Main Street polls, you would have been wrong as well, but not for the same candidates. But combining the two was pretty spot on ultimately. So including for second choices, which is remarkable. If you think about it, in 2020, I was able to estimate very accurately how many votes from Derek Sloan and Leslie Lewis would go to Erin O'Toole and Peter MacKay. And I did this with the Main Street polls and by using the fundraising data of people who have donated to multiple campaigns. So this is pretty incredible that it's that accurate. And actually the two are pretty close to each other. So I have to say, now that I'm doing this, and now that I have it's essentially a file, right? In order to go from fundraising to data to riding level analysis, what I needed an Excel file where it was mapping each postal code into a riding. And such lists exist, including from Canada Post, but they're not free. And ultimately, I was lucky enough, it's one of the benefits of having many followers on Twitter. I put it out there right a month ago, and I said, hey, does anybody have a file? And one guy that used to be a staffer from the Conservative Party just emailed it to me, said, yeah, I have it from 2019. And that really made it a lot easier for me. I didn't have.
Yeah, those keys are like, it saves you a ton of work, eh?
Oh yeah, no, because otherwise, I mean, I didn't have a way to do this on my own or without paying a lot of money to Canada Post or some universities to get access to their data. So, but no, that has been great. I love Main Street when they do this, and the fact that they're able to go and get the membership list and to poll those people. That's so much more valuable than any other firm out there. So that's great. And I think this what they're doing for the United Conservative has been very useful and very interesting.
Do you so we've talked about the federal race. I know you haven't spent nearly as much time on the provincial leadership race because it's been shorter. But what's your read on that race from your data analytics?
Yeah, so we don't have fundraising data, right? My understanding is Election Alberta does not provide this until after the race is over. So that's a big problem. But if we use the other metrics we have, the polls you just showed from Main Street, they've been showing Danielle Smith ahead and pretty comfortably for a while. If we use Google Trends, I mean, it's a massacre. I mean, she's usually dominating like almost as much as Pierre Poilievre is. So my read on this, and I'm fairly confident at this point, I think she has it. I would be quite surprised if Danielle Smith is not the next leader of the United Conservative. I think she signed up a lot of members. She's doing the right campaign. It upsets some people out there, because she might, especially economically, she sometimes almost left wing on some issues, it seems. But I mean, I think she, when we say you have the touch on the pulse, right? I mean,
the zeitgeist, right? The zeitgeist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think the same way as Poilievre got it right, I think Danielle Smith got it right. I mean, in this case, I mean, in 2022, especially in Alberta, in conservative circle, if you want to win, you have to be anti-woke, anti-mandate, pro-oil and gas, and really hard on this. And so you can ignore a lot of other things. They would forgive a lot of things, the voters or the members, but you have to be hard on this. So when I see, for instance, let's talk about Bryan Jean Reno, whose campaign, I mean, to me, this is the perfect counterexample. He's not getting it. He's not a bad guy. He's a talented politician, but I don't know if it's his advisors or what, but he's not getting the right intuition right now. And it's pretty shocking how bad his campaign has been to me.
Well, and this speaks to vibes, right? This is the Anthony Kosh argument, right? Is that Pierre got the vibes, Danielle got the vibes, Bryan didn't get the vibes, and Jean Charest didn't get the vibes.
No, Jean Charest himself isn't too bad at times. I think sometimes he's doing the right thing, but his team is absolutely terrible, and it definitely doesn't get the vibes. It's pretty shocking how bad his team has been, from the co-chair to the press secretary. I mean, I'm really just shocked. And I think I've said it many times on Twitter, but when they're trying to gaslight us into, when they say stupid things such as, well, we're going to have at least 80% of the points in Quebec, are you lying to us? Or are you really that bad? I mean, I really want to know. I genuinely don't know. I want to know if there is a data guy in the Charest campaign who really believe that they're about to win 80% of the points in Quebec. I don't know which one is worse, but I really cannot tell, because if they were just trying to gaslight us, I don't think they would go that far. They would tell us they're going to win Quebec. But why do you go as far as saying 80%? They said it many times. They said we're going to win at least 80% of the points, which, I can go on record right now. It's not going to happen.
Has anyone ever won 80% of the points in any riding in a leadership race? That I can't think of it.
No. I'm closing my website. If on the September 10th, Jean Charest gets 80% of the points in Quebec, honestly, I'm just going to retire and close my website, because why would anybody listen to me? I mean, I would be a massive fraud.
So true. Okay, we only have 20 minutes left, and there's so many things I want to talk about. One of the things that I want to talk about is actually not political, but it is political, but it's not political parties. And that's the mandates and the polling around the mandates and the information around the mandates. I'm sure you followed that very closely. I followed your Twitter as you're following that. What is your read on the sentiment of Canadians around the mandates?
like for mask or vaccines or
let's say the vaccine, because mask is a little messier, I think.
Yeah.
The vaccine.
Vaccine, I think, and last year I was working for the CBC, well, French CBC. So don't come after me, people who want to defend the CBC. It's French CBC. And I was doing this once a week on Friday morning. I was talking for like 5-10 minutes about one issue, like, about polls, right? But so we've done abortion, everything. And so obviously we've talked about those mandates, vaccine mandates or COVID restrictions many times. So my read on this has been the public opinion has shifted pretty quickly over the last 6 months. I mean, just 6 or 7 months ago, just before Omicron, people like me who were pretty against mandates by then, we were the minority. We were clearly the minority. I mean, there was no question out there that even in Alberta, or maybe Alberta was one of the few provinces where it was more 50-50, but everywhere else, BC, Quebec, Ontario, people are like, no, that makes sense. We should actually, we should be required to use, to have a vaccine to go to a restaurant, to work. There were many polls that made me genuinely sad. I mean, it was like, it's not totalitarian, but you had a lot of people out there who really had no respect for people's choices out there. And they were willing to go really far. When you ask people, well, should people get fired if they don't get the vaccine? And you have like even, let's say 40% of the population that say, yes, they should. This is sad to me. This is really, you have people who are willing to have people go bankrupt because they don't want to take a vaccine, which, I've said it many times. I mean, I'm triple vax. I think the people who refuse to take the vaccine, I mean, I went as far as saying that they were selfish at times because I think, you should have done it. But at the same time, it's still your choice. But Omicron changed all of this, right? I mean, once Omicron happened and we all got it, many people multiple times, you were triple vaccinated, you were getting it 2 weeks after your third dose or whatever, this really changed public opinion and in the direction where people are, well, what's the point anymore? I mean, we see already the take-up rates of the third shot is already a lot lower. It's barely above 50%. I'm guessing the second booster will be very, very low. Parents didn't vaccinate their kids, right? They're 5 to 11. It's very low. It's borderline zero, between 0 and 6 now. So public opinion has shifted. And again, it goes back to this. In terms of timing, this is where Poilievre was really right. I mean, his timing was perfect. I mean, the race started when public opinion started to shift. He went really hard on this, maybe too hard when, you go as far as supporting the convoy. But in terms of general public opinion, he was right there. So, I mean, I don't see any appetite for any vaccine mandates anytime soon. I think that's something a lot of those health scientists, the people who are like terminally online, sometimes on Twitter, and they don't really seem to get, they really have a bad grasp on human psychology, I think at times. And they don't get that now that people got Omicron, and for many people, there was like, oh, I was really sick for 2 or 3 days and then I was okay. That changed that was an entire different game. They're like, well, now, I've got it. I'm triple vax. I don't care anymore. I literally just don't care about COVID. I don't care about vaccines. And I think they thought it would be the opposite. They thought that more people getting it would even raise awareness and, oh my God, we really need to close the economy. We need to all wear masks. We need to get like a shot every 3 months. But it's the exact opposite that happened. People just don't care and they want to move on. And so by now, I haven't looked at any data recently. To be fair, I don't know if they even ask, like in the last 2 months, because there is no mandate anymore anywhere. I think there is really zero appetite for this. Well, there is an appetite from a very small minority, like, maybe 20-25% who, my guess is, if you were to ask them, do you think there should be a mask mandate forever? They would say yes. I mean, we've got some polls over the last 2 years. I said that it was making me sad, but those were the polls that were making me sad. You genuinely had, it wasn't 1, 2, 3%. You had like 15, 20, 25% of the population in North America that was pretty okay with a completely totalitarian future where we need a vaccine mandate. We need a QR code everywhere. We need triple mask everywhere. You lose your job if you're not vaccinated. You pay an extra tax, and that's creepy to me when I see this. To know that out there you have 20% of the population that thinks this way.
Yeah. Okay. You've talked a lot about the rallies. You've been to a couple of them. I've been to a couple of them. I don't know if Zach's been to any. Have you been to any Pierre rallies?
I haven't, no.
Something very strange is happening that's never happened before in Canadian politics, from what I can tell. Like, this is beyond Trudeau 2015. This is a whole new thing. Something has changed. What's not your numbers, because we've talked about that the whole time. What is your Heidegger said, or I think it was Heidegger, it was some great philosopher, when Napoleon rode by his window, said, sometimes the spirit of history rides by your window on a white horse. And basically he was saying that Napoleon was embodying the spirit of history in that moment, right? He was, and you can't argue with that. The zeitgeist of revolutionary France that spread across Europe, he was the embodiment of the spirit of that. We see Pierre being the embodiment of the spirit of this take back control of your life, right? Of the government has gone too far and we need to push them back from their overreach. But what do you get the sense when you're in these rallies? Is it personal popularity of Pierre, or is it the popularity of his ideas?
I think it's a little bit of both, and as the race went on, it might be more and more about Poilievre himself. I mean, I tweeted the other day, right, 2 days ago. It's just insane. I mean, when you arrive, I mean, it's almost like groupies, right? I mean, you have guys who are like, they're jumping around and they're like, oh my God, he's in the room over there, and like they're really losing it. It's almost like girls at the BTS concert. So it's pretty crazy. I agree. I don't think I have seen it before. Overall, and when you were there, it's a mix of his popularity and charisma. Some people will say he has zero, some people say he has a lot. So obviously it might be a little bit divisive, and his policies as well, right? I mean, he has really stuck to the same policies essentially over the last 8 months. And by now it reminds me a little bit of Trump 2016. And again, I hate when people say Poilievre is like Trump, because I think policy-wise it's not the case, and ideologically-wise it's not remotely similar. But in terms of dynamic of the race and charisma and popularity contest, there are some similarities, right? I mean, in the same way in 2016, you had stuff such as lock her up that became like really rallies. And I don't think, the 5,000 people that were really screaming this, I really genuinely don't believe that they all wanted Hillary Clinton in jail. It just it's almost like supporting a sport team, right? Or a meme at this point. And so when you go to a Poilievre rally and he says like, defend the CBC, or he says like, I'm not going to send my minister to the World Economic Forum. I don't know. I'm guessing many people really want those things to happen, but I think by now it's a meme, and it's just a way for them to express their support. And it might be just an anti-Trudeau thing. Honestly, if you had to summarize it, he's trying to just gather the anti-Trudeau vote. And so you need, especially now during your leadership, you need to motivate them, and it's working. It's working really, really well. Obviously, I'm guessing some people will argue that Maxime Bernier had massive rallies in 2021 during the campaign, and that's true. But I don't think it's on the same scale, right? I mean, it's Poilievre, the 2 rallies in Vancouver were in East Van, so people had to drive from far or come from, I don't think everybody was from East Van out there, because that's not really the best region for them. But there is an enthusiasm that wasn't found before. And people expect, or some people say, oh, he should pivot after the leadership. But there are a few things where, A, I don't think he wants to, but B, I really genuinely think it would be a mistake to do so. I mean, the reason he's motivating people is by not flip-flopping, is by not apologizing, and by actually sticking to, I'm going to defend the CBC. So I think there is zero chance that he's going to defend the CBC to well, we're going to do a panel of experts that are going to review the situation and give us expert, like the every no tool flip-flop. So no, I think it's going to go into the general election and it's going to say, we're going to defend the CBC. He would most likely articulate it in more details, but overall, he's going to say it and he's going to keep using those words. So it's pretty impressive how much it works on the right? I mean, with almost everybody on the right, really. After that, whether he's really catching the zeitgeist for like the entire nation, I don't know. I'm not ready to go as far. And, you said to not talk about data, but I cannot completely ignore the fact that, polls right now haven't shown a massive bump for the Conservatives. So it's early, it's the summer, he's not the leader. I guess we're going to see this fall. But at the very least, on what he's supposed to do right now, the people he's supposed to motivate on the right, yeah, for sure, 100%, he's doing it really well. And, we're talking about Poilievre, but I think we should talk about Leslie Lewis, who's coming out of this leadership race very damaged to me. And she was, many of her voters from 2020, she was the one motivating the right-wing vote in 2020. She was this new candidate who was unapologetic. She was a social conservative running, and she was not apologizing for it. But this time it hasn't worked. And I think it's because her thunder got stolen by Poilievre completely this time. So she entered this race thinking she would win or she could have a chance. She will end up she's going to be fortunate to get over 10%, I think, at this point. So that's a very sad situation for her. And I think she's going to have to rethink her future, not necessarily in the party, but, if there was even another leadership race 3 years from now, I'm not sure she's entering it at this point.
That is a really fascinating and untold story of this leadership race. I would totally agree. I've mentioned it a couple times on Twitter, but it's actually shocking to me how fast she's fallen. Like I will be surprised if she gets half of the vote she got last time.
Yeah, no, she's really down to the core social conservative voters, who really, the people who vote based on abortion, let's say. And they exist. You have many people, but the thing is, there used to be 20% of 300,000 members, but now you have almost 700,000 members. And the people who sign up, they're not the pro-life one. I mean, the pro-life one, they were already members before. So no, that's I don't want to say sad for her, because ultimately that's her campaign and she didn't do what she had to do to really get this momentum going. I mean, but it's definitely part of the equation. I think this is a pretty good symbol of how much Poilievre has really gathered the right completely. Like he has gathered everybody from essentially the social conservative moderates to many red Tories, right? I mean, you see have some really hardcore red Tories that will never vote for him. You have some hardcore pro-life people who most likely will not vote for Poilievre because he's rated as bad by pro-life groups. But anybody anywhere in between, that's it. He's the guy, and they're gonna go in an election with him, and they're gonna get out, as opposed to every no tool where I think many people, I mean, we haven't talked about this, but remember how until the beginning of the election last year, the Conservative were polling at like 25%, like under every no tool. Like it was a disaster. That's why we went in election, right? Trudeau thought, well, I'm going to win an easy majority. And then once the election started, O'Toole increased, right? They even took the lead for a little bit. And people were like, oh, wow, it's really, gathering all those moderates and those swing voters, and that's awesome. But if you actually look at the polls, the main difference between before the campaign and during the campaign is it's more the hardcore conservative in Alberta and Saskatchewan who didn't like him after the flip-flop or didn't like him at all. And once the election got triggered, they're like, fine, we're going to rally behind you because we really don't like the other guy. We don't like you. We're not motivated, but we're going to like you for the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and that's what they did. And most of them, they still voted for him, not all, but that's essentially what happened. They pinched their nose. and they voted for Erin O'Toole. So that's essentially the only dynamic we saw. So,
but they won't have to pinch their nose this time.
Yeah, exactly. Another group will have to, but I don't even think it's that big, right? As I said, outside of like a really small group of people who call themselves centrist and, they tolerate, if we do on a spectrum from 0 to 10, like left to right, those people, they only tolerate opinions between 4.9 and 5.1, anything beyond this, it's radical right or radical left. You have some of those, right? I mean, and I'm guessing they will either pinch their noses or they will vote Trudeau, or they will not vote. I could see them not voting at all the next time if Trudeau is still the leader, but they represent a very, very small minority. I mean, I'm not saying we can ignore them as the conservative movement. I'm not saying that Poilievre shouldn't try to get them back, but at the end of the day, you need to realize that what you need to do to get those back might lose you a lot of your current coalition. So at some point, if you win but you lose a ton, not worth it.
A lot of questions, Zach. Any questions? We got about 5 minutes left, I think. Yeah, 5 minutes.
Only one, and you touched on it, I guess, just a little bit. But if Poilievre were to win, which it sounds like he's going to, how strong do you see him in leading an opposition against Trudeau in the next election? Can we just do a little bit? Maybe it's too far ahead to predict. You probably don't have any data points for it yet because he's not the actual leader. But if you were to speculate, where would that land?
Yeah, so I think my view is it's not a slam dunk, right? It's not like, because, it's not like when Trudeau took over the Liberals and they went from 20 to 40%. I don't think we're going to see this, partially because we now live in a more polarized world where people are more set into their parties, and you have like the Truanen who will stay with Trudeau. And my guess is, if I were to bet today, I would essentially take the score of Erin O'Toole last year. You add half of the PPC, so that's about 2.5. So that put them at about 36, 37 nationwide. And you add another 1 to 3%, I would say, blue collar NDP in Northern Ontario, some folks in, Newfoundland or Atlantic Canada. So plus some increase, just raw increase in Ontario, in the GTA. I think, for instance, he has been doing much better in terms of community outreach, something that I think Erin O'Toole was, in hindsight, pretty bad with. I mean, Erin O'Toole essentially said, we're going to go get white blue-collar workers the same way as Boris Johnson and his entire campaign. And he got them, some of them, but he didn't care about any of the visible minorities in the GTA or GVA. So that's where I would put him. So I would say, I think I've said it before on Twitter, but I see Poilievre has like a high ceiling, high floor, low ceiling. That's essentially, unless something happens and there is a wave. But essentially, I think for me, Poilievre guarantees 140 seats. I really don't see a Poilievre-led Conservative Party falling below 140 seats in 2025. After this, obviously, the question is, how do you get the extra 29, 28 seats you need to win? That's the one where I'm not ready to make a call. I mean, I think he has the potential to win them, and I can see him winning a majority either through the GTA or by making gains in Quebec, but it's going to require more work, and it's not going to be as easy as to convert like half of the PPC voters. So 140 the floor, ceiling, getting a majority for any candidate would require either a massive breakthrough the GTA or a massive breakthrough Quebec. That's the path. I mean, you do the math and that's where it has to go. I mean, getting to 140 is very easy. 2 more in Atlantic Canada, 1 more in Northern Ontario, 1 more in BC. So that's fine. You get to 140 very, very quickly. Getting to 168 is difficult. And I don't know. I think they're going to have to make a choice at some point. Do we go hard on, do we want to get this path through the GTA or through Quebec? I think that might be the biggest question they have to ask themselves. I think Poilievre has the potential for both. I'm not sure you can do both in the same election. because the campaign you have to run would be very different. My feeling is they will go for the GTA and they would just think, oh, we're going to keep our 12 ridings in Quebec, but go for a breakthrough in the GTA by essentially making a breakthrough with visible minorities. I think
that's the Harper model, right? The Harper model is the GTA and ignore Quebec.
Yeah, exactly. I wish, and as somebody who speaks French and who live in Quebec, I actually wish that one conservative leader would actually try to do a massive breakthrough in Quebec and really establish a more conservative base out there, because I think there is massive potential out there. And I think, we've seen potential in the past, both under Andrew Scheer and Erin O'Toole. The Tories in Quebec, they were polling at 25% at some point. And both times what happened is the campaign started, the French debate happened, people realized, oh my God, those guys are terrible in French and with their political opinions, and in particular Andrew Scheer with his pro-life opinion. And then they went to the Bloc Québécois, back to the Liberals. But right now there is a big potential there for Poilievre. He speaks much better French. I think his position could be better in Quebec. He doesn't have to argue about abortion, for instance.
And his name is Poilievre.
Yeah, exactly. Many people think he's actually from Quebec, right?
Yeah, exactly. Nobody knows he's Albert. Well, thank you, Bryan. I'd like to have you back right after the leadership to talk about the results after you've had a time to analyze them. Unfortunately, we have 3 more podcasts we have to do today, so I got to let you go here. But thank you so much for coming on. And more importantly, thank you for what you do, because I really appreciate your work. And I know thousands, if not tens of thousands of Canadians do.
Well, thank you for this. I would gladly come back if I wasn't wrong. If I'm wrong, I would just block your email.
Oh, if you're wrong, it'll be even better. We'll be like, oh, you've deleted your site, given up on politics. All right, Zach, do you have anything else? Any last moments or?
No, I'm all good over here. Thank you for all the work you do. This has been a really interesting conversation, and I hope you're right, because I want to have you back.
Exactly. All right. Well, thanks, guys.
All right, take care. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to The Canadian Story. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at The CAD Story. That's The CAD Story. If you enjoy this podcast, please share it with your friends and family. Let's work together to remind Canadians how great their country is.